Hey, I'm Steve Folland. Welcome to another one. Thanks for downloading the final one of this season. Hope you've been enjoying it. This episode, as with all of the others this time around, have been supported by my course. That's How to Get Started Being Freelance. Basically, I put together all of my own experience, but that of all of my guests of the podcast too, so that those starting out don't have to make the same mistakes that most of us tend to make and have to figure out as we go along. It saves you a lot of time Googling. You can find out more about it at beingfreelance.com. That's the course. Right now, though, let's find out what it's like being freelance. For this week's guest, that is freelance web developer Tom Hurst.
People who move jobs tend to get pay rises quicker than the people that stay in the same job for a long period of time. The same goes for freelance pricing. I think if you just charge the same rate forever, you're not really going to be getting to those higher echelons of pricing. Product work is kind of pitched as complete passive income, which it's not. You've got to be talking about your product, your book, your course, whatever it is, quite frequently to get, the sales into an amount of money that you could actually live off. When you stop talking about your products, people kind of forget about them because there's someone else launching another product. What jumping straight into freelancing taught me at a very early age. It's taught me how to fend for myself really early on. And I think that there's a point that you get to when you're freelance or solopreneur or whatever that you've always got confidence in yourself that you'll be able to make money somewhere.
Yeah, so there is Tom, his story coming up in a moment. You may know him because he's made a bit of a name for himself over the past year on Twitter. I mean, he's been freelance for a long time, over a decade, but has been talking a lot more about his experience on Twitter and gaining quite a following on there. We'll talk about that, no doubt, very soon indeed. Links to him and everybody else at beingfreelance.com that I have spoken to this season and for that matter across the last 6 years. Gulp. You can find them at beingfreelance.com. This is the last one of the season, but that's okay. All the others are still waiting there. Over 250 episodes, so that if you've missed some, you can go back and catch up. Of course, please do share them online, and if you've enjoyed this season but you've not left a review yet, please do consider doing that as well. Whilst I'm taking a break until September from the podcast, it doesn't mean I'm disappearing entirely. I'll still be hanging out in the Being Freelance community, so do come say hi. You can find links to that at beingfreelance.com. Okay, let's crack on and finish up with this week's guest, and that is freelance web developer Tom Hurst. Hey, Tom.
Hi, Steve. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for doing this. As ever, how about we get started hearing how you got started being freelance?
So, yeah, I went through university, not really doing what I'm freelancing for. So I'm a freelance web developer, but I did multimedia and communication design, which is more like videography and things like that. So yeah, out of university I thought, well, I best try and earn some money, best get a job. So I went and applied for a web development role at the local college. And as soon as I sat in the seat waiting to be interviewed, I just hated everything about the whole process. I hated wearing a suit. I hated thinking that I might have to turn up here every day for the next 10 years of my life. And I don't know what it was. I must have had like these thoughts before, but it all just came as like a single epiphany that, you know what, I know loosely how to build WordPress websites. Why don't I go freelance instead? And 12 years later, I'm still here.
So literally your first job has been freelance?
Yeah, I've had no job. And I think that everyone always is quite surprised about that because a lot of people start, in like a design agency, development agency, and then go freelance after that. But yeah, I went straight into it feet first.
So how did you go about getting those first clients? Yeah,
so first clients, basically I just told everyone that I knew, the skills that I had and how that I could help them out. I think that a lot of people underestimate, their existing network because, that's how network effects work, right? You tell your dad, you tell your brother, you tell your sister, you tell your friends, and then they've got their own brothers, sisters and friends. And if you do a good job for one person, there's a good chance that they'll know someone else who needs a good job doing for them too. So that's where it all started for me.
And were you living at home at that time?
Yeah. So I had a bit of a, safety net, I would say. So I was lucky in that regard. So I was living at home. And I just basically told everyone, look, I've got these WordPress skills. Who needs a website? And then the first two trickled in from my dad and my uncle, and then the rest is history, really, from that side of things.
So how would you say that you've got clients then over those past 12 years beyond that first batch?
Yeah,
has it all been referral or?
There's been plenty of referral, plenty of repeat business, which I always say, that's the king if you can get it. But yeah, mainly through my personal website. That's my primary marketing channel. So straight away, I got my first client and I was working for them on a long-time basis. But in the background, I set up a personal website and I really honed in on, doing some like research into like SEO and things like that were a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but I knew would stand me in good stead. So then after around 6 months to a year or so, leads started trickling in because I'd optimised well for, the freelance WordPress developer search term. And then, that's still the main source of leads to this day, really. I do really well on the organic stuff. I don't really pay for any ads. Most of it comes through the personal website.
And with that SEO, was that local to you or?
No, I focused broadly on quite a wide term. So the main term that I focused on was freelance WordPress developer. I noticed that people were searching for that, did a bit of keyword research, and I just doubled down on making my personal website wholly focused on that. It's kind of strange really because there's not a lot of people in the town where I'm from that will pay a decent amount of money for a website. So it was always the plan really to go more broad than that.
Right.
So I decided to optimize for, a technology in WordPress around my freelance services rather than, web developer in Barnsley, for instance.
Yeah. What were you doing? Were you like blogging on it or?
You know what? I didn't do that much blogging right at the beginning. Like I said before, I just focused on these single service landing pages and it did really well for me. I think a lot of the studies that I did about small business when I first started were around like marketing and copywriting. So I think that you don't need that much traffic when, the copy's good and you've got like a really good flow down the page. And I think that's what a lot of freelancers fail to do, especially developers. It's more about you land on the personal website and there might be a GitHub link and nothing else. But I always went with, the long form marketing angle of a landing page, and it seemed to stand me in really good stead.
So if somebody visited your webpage today,
yeah,
would that differ greatly from how it looked over the years gone by?
It's probably a lot more polished. I'm a lot older on my picture as well, but the few more greys, as freelancing will do to you sometimes. But it's pretty much the same structure and philosophy that I've had from early on. It's just adapted and developed over time.
How did you get on with pricing?
So at the beginning, I always believe that a freelancer kind of falls into the pricing methodology that the first client gives them. And my first client just said, I'll pay you X amount per day. And that's kind of like what I stuck on for quite a long time, really. And then, like the marketing angle, I kind of got super interested in pricing and how things, the value of things and variety in pricing and the different methodologies that you can use and things like that. And as time's gone on, obviously, I've gone into researching that a lot more, reading a lot of books about it, putting into practice a lot of my own experiments. And now, my thoughts and feelings have kind of changed. I prefer to bill fixed price nowadays compared to, by time.
I'm intrigued by the word experiments, though. So you were trying different things out.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things that a lot of freelancers don't do. They don't experiment ever with the pricing, whether it be the value of what they're charging or the methodology that they're using. And I think that there's a lot to be gained by doing that. I think a good analogy for this is like, let's say, people who move jobs tend to get pay rises quicker than the people that stay in the same job for a long period of time. The same goes for freelance pricing. I think if you just, charge the same rate forever, you're not really going to be getting to those higher echelons of pricing. So experimenting is something that I wish I would have done earlier on, actually, when I first started.
What did you try out that did or didn't work?
Firstly, different prices. So I was working for the long-term client that I mentioned that I got via my dad. And we were on like the same rate for ages. And I was just happy to have work right there and then. And I think that what I should have done earlier is, start increasing my prices. I got more valuable to that client because the more that I worked for them, the more that they had confidence in me, the more that I knew their systems, the more valuable I was becoming. So eventually I did start to increment my price by, certain amounts with that client. But first, I experimented with new clients. So the clients that were coming in through my personal website, I wanted to, keep my little safety net, but I would experiment with new clients by giving them the new price first. And if I was noticing that I could replace that work with the new, more expensive work, then I had, that, again, a backup to pitch against the existing client and raise my price with them as well. So that's kind of the thing that I always say is like, it's good to experiment with multiple clients when you've got issues of price to contend with, because if one won't pay it, the likelihood is that someone else might.
Yeah. And so when you started to move more towards like doing a fixed price, did you find that you had to really be very clear about what it was? A website is a broad thing.
Yeah.
Did you have any challenges with that?
Yeah, I think the main challenge that you will face is scope creep, especially if you're a little bit inexperienced with giving fixed prices. But I mean, the main two ways to combat scope creep, as I've found it, is to have a really super definitive scope up front that you've both signed, so you can point out, nicely that, sorry, this is not in the scope, we can do a separate project after this. And then the second way to do it is to charge enough so that you don't really care about small scope creep. So what I mean by that is, like, let's say on a website, you want to change the colour of a font. I think that when you've not charged that much, you start getting a little bit annoyed by those constant changes, and you might see them as scope creep. But don't be doing like new features and stuff if it's not in the spec. That's another thing. You've got to be able to stand your ground, and that's where the contract or the proposal with the specific scope comes in really handy.
Do you use certain software for like putting together proposals or contracts?
Not really, no. I just use Google Docs. I have like a template that I've wrote myself. Took inspiration from a few people over the years. Jonathan Stark has got a really good proposal template, which I've looked at and incorporated into my own and put my spin on it. I just use that. No particular software. Yeah.
Jonathan was on this podcast, so if you've not heard that episode, go to beingfreelance.com. We'll put a link in the show notes to Tom's to check out his. And obviously, he was very much about that ditching hourly.
Yeah.
Did you hesitate when you did that? Like, how did it feel when you were moving out from that?
I didn't, because I think I'd seen the Matrix, if you want to use that as a analogy. You know what I mean? I'd seen that just because I do something, I shouldn't be punished for doing things quickly. And the better that I get at my job, the quicker that I'm going to get. So essentially, I'm going to be earning the wrong way around if I, stick to selling time for money. And I think that once you've actually seen that and you start thinking about the value conversation, it's really difficult not to want to make that switch, and you probably never will switch back.
You've mentioned having like recurring clients, retainer type clients.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you, and how do you work it?
I mean, nowadays, I still prefer to do it on a project-by-project basis. So it'll just be, this is the brief, this is the project price, but there might be another project off the back of this project to come later, which we will rebrief and then quote again. But I have done retainers as well in the past. I prefer to do retainers based on, like my availability, really, to answer questions and things like that, as opposed to giving a set amount of hours, because you just hourly billing, really. If you do that, you've got a bit of a loss of autonomy there. So yeah, I still try and stick at the most of the times project by project. I think that works really well for setting expectations and aligning incentives, really.
I see. So it's less about retainer, more about keeping that relationship going and fitting in the next thing they want.
Exactly, that's what it is for me now, and I think that works really well for incremental software projects.
What happens when somebody comes to you and they want something but you're tied up on something else, though?
Sometimes I will still take it on and I'll project manage it, and I'll get someone else to help me out. Because I think when you've freelanced for such a long time and you've tried to involve yourself in the community and things like that, you do end up making good connections. So you can share leads, you can subcontract and things like that. But it'd have to be the right project. That's kind of what I say nowadays. Like, if it's not something that's not a good fit, then I'm just not bothered anymore. But if I was tied up on a really big project and I was like using most of my development time on that, and another one came in that looked like a good fit, I wouldn't hesitate. I probably wouldn't try and say, oh, can we do this next year or something like that, because people don't really typically want to wait that long. So I would probably still try and run the project myself, but bring in external help.
And when you do that, like, how do you front that to the client?
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I mean, sometimes they don't really need to know, number one, because it's like if I employ like a builder, I don't really want to know every single person who's laid every single brick. I just want the house at the end of it. And I think that the same thing applies. If someone's coming to me for my expertise and they trust me to facilitate this project, then I think that a lot of it's irrelevant, and it actually can sometimes benefit a project too. So, for instance, if someone comes to me for a design and build, I can design, but I'm not the best designer. So I'm actually doing the best for that client by bringing in my designer friend to help me on that. So that's my take on that whole question, really.
How did you find when you started bringing on other people to work with you, like managing those relationships?
I don't do it excessively. I do it only when it makes sense. So I think it's important to keep like a small pool of people that you trust. And then just honesty and just being really open and about, setting expectations, like what do I expect from you? Who's going to be in charge of, managing the client and things like that. You don't really want there to be any ambiguity or even sometimes overlap. That can be a bit dangerous as well. So if you get, let's use the designer and developer angle again. If you're both, having a line of conversation with the client, sometimes things can get lost in translation between the team that you're running. So I think, it's managing those relationships. It's just about setting expectations, making sure that you're aligned and making sure that each party knows exactly what they're responsible for within the project.
We talked about pricing, but how do you deal with payments? Like, are your projects quite long, or?
They can vary. Most of them are probably at least 2 or 3 weeks, and then at most they've been years. But again,
years?
Yeah. I worked.
Okay.
I've just done a website project. I launched it at New Year, and that had been, I think, it just nearly 2 years that had been, and that was like on an incremental project basis. But to answer your question, I try to keep my subcontractors on the same payment terms as how I build the original client. So if it's a fixed price, I will say, look, this is the part of this brief that I would like you to fulfill for me. Can you give me a fixed price as well? And then everybody just knows where they stand, and there's no, you don't have all the downsides of the hourly billing stuff, like logging hours and arguing about how long things take and stuff like that. It just removes all that nonsense, really.
Yeah. But do you take like a payment, like do you have milestone payments or like?
It depends. I mean, the default for me is to ask for everything up front if I can get it. That's the default for me, and then I'm happy then to pay my subcontractors everything up front as well. But let's say most of the time, you're going to have to give some leeway on payment terms, and I'd rather do that than give leeway on price, really. So if we go like to, I don't know, 50% up front, 50% at the end, I'll then match that, with my subcontractor. But I have done milestones as well before. So, you might do a third and then a third after a month and then a third at the end, something like that. So, yeah, I've experimented with quite a lot of these.
And what makes you happier? The upfront, everything upfront?
Yeah, upfront, because it's just, you know where you stand. You're not chasing invoices, The more invoices that I have to write, the higher I'll probably put the price, because it's just taking me time. So the least invoices I can send per project, the better.
Yeah. And how about how you work? Do you work from home, or have you got somewhere you go to? Yeah,
so I'm in my home office now. This is where I work, and I've worked like this for 12 years. So yeah, never had an office, never had a co-working space or anything like that. I'm quite good at I like my own space, really, and I think that's where I do my best work, in solitude.
But that's the thing, isn't it? Solitude.
Yeah.
So are you part of, you mentioned community earlier, but like, is it just you, or do you have other people that you chat to about business? Yeah.
So I've met a lot of people, through the last 12 years, through the freelance stuff, through the writing stuff, through the Twitter stuff as well. I've met a lot of really cool people that I would consider to be, like genuine friends now, even though some of them I've not really met in real life. But I think the balance is, if you do thrive in solitude when you're working, like what I definitely do, is to balance it with being quite extroverted on the social side. That's where my balance is. So I really like, my time with my friends, going to the football. Me and my wife like to eat out and stuff like that. Take the kids, to the park and stuff quite a lot. So I think you can make it work, even if, sometimes it is quite isolating at times.
So how many kids have you got?
I've got one and another one on the way.
Oh, nice. Congratulations.
Cheers.
But how do you find working from home with the family, presumably around?
Yeah, it's not so bad, because they kind of know, like, the separation. That they know what you see is what you get with me. So they know that I work well when I can focus on things for a long period of time. So if they know that I'm on a project and the door's shut behind me, they know that that's it. Leave Dad alone, and he'll come down when he's ready and things like that. So me and my wife have got a really good system of dealing with things like that. So yeah, it's we dovetail really well. And again, it's about setting expectations really and letting people know how you work best professionally and within the family too.
I like that. It sounds like your professional experience led into parenthood quite nicely. You just got to watch those kids on the scope creep.
There's always scope creep with kids. You just have to leave them to it.
How has your business changed then? Is it just client work or?
Yeah, so for the first 11 years or so, yeah, pretty much just client work. Got to kind of a limit of what I could do on my own, so started like helping a few friends out, bringing them into my projects. But then when the pandemic came around in March last year, I think it seems to have been forever now, but yeah, March last year, I decided to try and do some other things just to build some other revenue streams and things like that. I got this overwhelming urge to want to teach as well, because I've been like doing this for so long now. I thought I want to try and like help others along, through my experience. So yeah, I've started, number one, I started building an audience on Twitter quite intentionally. And then I started creating educational products for freelancers, just going through my experience and the tactics and techniques that have helped me. And I also had a mentorship program for freelancers as well. So I was mentoring people who were earlier on in their careers one-on-one, and I found that super fulfilling too. And I've actually had to close it down recently because it was just getting a little bit too much. The demand was higher than I expected. So I'm looking at doing that in a more scalable way. But yeah, essentially, the way that my career's changed is that I want to try and help more people on this path at scale, really. And that's like feels like the next chapter for me.
Whilst also diversifying your income.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how you've done that, though, because you talked about being intentional in growing your Twitter audience. So you already had, you were making friends on Twitter. What changed? What did you start doing differently when it came to March 2020 and onwards?
Yeah, I started just sharing the thoughts that I already have in my head, really, publicly, and seeing if they resonated and helped other people. And then when I noticed that they did, I just started doing more of it. And I just I guess I got the serotonin rush or dopamine fix or whatever you want to call it. And I was really enjoying it, people tweeting from all over the world saying like, thanks so much for sharing this. And it kind of struck this chord with me about how I want to try and help people, understand like what being freelance is all about and how they can make a success of it.
And you tend to go for like quite a long thread. That's like it's almost like a blog post in a thread, right?
Yeah, that's kind of become the signature, and I think that they're probably the ones that have done the best. I do a lot of off the cuff stuff too, but yeah, the threads, I think, talking in like Twitter and audience building terms, they seem really overpowered at the moment. It seems like if you want to really try and grow your following, the threads is the best way to do it quick. And I kind of just like landed on that really, especially with the pricing freelance projects one, which I think it's got like 2.5 million impressions. So 2.5 million people have seen just the thought that I had in my head really that I decided to write out one afternoon. And yeah, it just shows you really how, if you share what you know, how it can like alter the path of your life, basically. And it definitely has done for me, as I wrote the book about pricing freelance projects off the back of that thread.
But in terms of timescale, like when did you then think, oh, okay, I can turn this into something more, or that there's people here who might want it? Do you know what, like, you could end up creating things and then there's like nobody there for it. You'd obviously already found that people like this tweet, but yeah, what was your process?
Yeah. So I didn't plan anything whatsoever. I was just tweeting like daily and seeing what resonated. And I just thought, I'm going to write a thread off the top of my head. What do I know best? And it was like pricing, something that I've been involved in obviously for 12 years. Let's just tweet my thoughts about pricing and what I've learned. And then obviously, like you said, it blew up. So I could see that the demand was there for this information and experience. And I just felt compelled to drop everything else and write a more expanded version of it. So yeah, I think the tweet was on 30th of June last year, and I think by the 30th of July I'd written a 30,000 word book. So it was, yeah, I probably wouldn't do it like that again. But yeah, it was just a really good way of, I just started taking pre-orders, like when I saw the success of the thread, I thought maybe people want a little bit more. And I put a link up saying, if you're interested in reading the book, I'll write it, pre-order here. And I think I got like maybe 100 pre-orders or something like that. And then I wrote the book over the next 30 days, edited it, launched it. So within a month, basically.
Nice. How did you put it out?
I launched it on Gumroad. It was just an ebook. I am thinking about getting it made into a physical book as well, using like Amazon print on demand, but it's just something I haven't got round to yet. But yeah, it's done pretty well, and people seem to like it. So,
and how did you go about, within the space of a month, writing that much? Were you still doing client work?
Nah, I had to drop everything. I just had this thing. I just felt that the time was now to write this book. I've always wanted to write a book or launch a product. And obviously with the success of the thread and the attention that it got, I just thought there's never going to be a better opportunity. But yeah, in terms of the method, it was just a Google Doc, write down like all the bullet points of what I want to talk about pricing and what I've learnt, and then just flesh them out one by one. But yeah, I was doing no client work for that 30 days. I wasn't doing much sleeping either, if I'm honest, so I wouldn't want to do it again. But like when I finished it, it was just such a relief to get that first publication out there, and I think that the lessons that I learned from that will really help me, when I want to, because I definitely want to write more books in the future as well. So it was a great experience, but perhaps done a little bit too quickly.
Yeah, I was going to say, what did you learn from it? So first of all, slow down.
Yeah, slow down and give yourself a little bit more time. Like, obviously as a self-published author, you're probably going to have a few typos and things like that. So I didn't really give myself enough time to have an editor. So the first draft that went out had a few typos, so I've since had to go back and release them. But that's obviously the benefit of doing it as a digital product rather than a physical book, right? I could go back, edit the text, and then send everybody a new copy at no cost, really, to me. So, yeah, there's pros and cons, but that's one of the things that I learned. Just, you need more time than that to properly get it edited and things like that.
So it's one thing creating it, and I love that you did the pre-orders. Mm-hmm. How have you found then, like, keeping an interest and people perhaps finding your book whilst you're then getting on with the next thing and with client work?
Yeah. It's interesting, that one, because I think that the product work is kind of pitched as complete passive income, which it's not. Like, you've got to be talking about your product, your book, your course, whatever it is, quite frequently to get, the sales into an amount of money that you could actually live off. Recently, counter to that point, really recently, I've not really promoted any of my products this month as a bit of a test, to test the word of mouth and to see how that's going without me, constantly banging the drum. And I think I've still made about $1,500, which is pretty impressive to me anyway, from from not having to spend any time, writing about offers and doing deals and sales and things like that. But I think typically when you stop talking about your products, people kind of forget about them because there's someone else launching another product. I have a mailing list as well, which has grown to about 6,000 off the back of a free product that I launched first. So I can automate a lot of emails that way as well. So when someone downloads my free product, in the footer I have like a couple of links, to the paid products as well. So a lot of it's happening in the background as well. So there's ways and means really to keep it, in the public eye, I guess.
What was the free product?
So the free product, after I decided to grow the Twitter audience, I thought I'm going to need some way to get these people from Twitter onto my email list to own the audience kind of thing. So I wrote a really short ebook called 10 Steps to Becoming a Better Freelancer. And that's essentially like my manifesto of what's helped me throughout the last 12 years get to where I got. And yeah, I just thought, what can I write about that I can get out really quickly that people will still find value in? Because people always ask me, like, why did you not write about like WordPress development? And, I kind of could have, but I could write about freelancing because it's really top of mind. I'm doing this, I'm living this life. So that's where I really decided on the topic for the 10 steps.
Do you think it has helped your business as a web developer at all, though, or is it like two different audiences bringing in different revenue?
I think it has to a certain extent, because I think that when you show expertise in one area, it kind of infers expertise in another. So I think if you can come across as like a good communicator and like well-spoken, and you can write clearly about your ideas, it probably says that you're going to be quite good to work with as well. So I definitely see your point, though. There's definitely, while there is crossover, I do think that it's obviously two different types of people that are going to be interested in the two arms of what my solo business is. But saying that, there has been like clients who've like messaged and saying, "Oh, thanks for this project, Tom. It was really good to work on it. By the way, I just bought your pricing book." And I'm like, "Oh, that's cool."
Do you trade as, I know, Tom Hurst, or do you have a company name, or like I meant to ask?
Yeah. So for the first 11 years, I was just Tom Hurst, personal brand, freelance WordPress developer, and that's just everything that I did was under my own name. The last couple of months, I've launched an agency brand name, really, that's going to take hold of eventually all of my web development work. So at the minute, there's not that much difference because it's still me and then the freelancers that I work with on a regular basis anyway. But the idea is to do a lot more of the educational stuff, and I think that that's much more suited to my personal brand now than what the web development stuff is. So I'm in a bit of a transition with that. But yeah, I think you can have both, because I know that this is a big contention point for freelancers. Like, do I have a brand? Do I do my own personal name? I think if you're just going to stick to, doing the freelance web development, then I think that you do have a slight advantage as a personal brand. But if you ever want to sell that business at any one point, you can't really sell your own brand name because it's you. The business is you, right? So I think there's pros and cons to both, and I think that you can actually try both in parallel.
So the new name is like a company name, and it's not Tom Hurst Design or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the intention there, though, is that it means that Tom Hurst becomes the guy helping freelancers, and the web agency name becomes the front of that work.
Yeah, I think that's where it's naturally leading to. I'm still a little bit unsure. I'm just finding my way, but I think that's where it's going to end up, yeah.
I'm sure you'll experiment.
I will.
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of that diversifying income that we mentioned, so you've got the book that you created. What came after that? Did you do something else?
Yeah, so in January I recorded a course called the Personal Website Playbook, which is essentially teaching how I've generated leads for free from organic SEO traffic over the last 12 years. And that came about really because, number one, I wanted to test myself whether I could actually present a video course and not just be, because obviously I'd wrote the book. I wanted to try something a little bit different. And I thought that the material of that would work really well in video modules. So, we talk about like marketing, messaging, how to narrow your focus and write nice landing pages and things like that. And that's done pretty well as well. So yeah, I'm having quite a bit of a success in the digital product game. And
so you did the course. Mm-hmm. Anything after that?
Yeah, there's going to be more stuff. I'm actually working on another short course right now. It's going to be Twitter focused, because I think that people, even freelancers, can really increase their opportunities by being active on Twitter. Obviously, my approach has been a little bit different, but I think that if you can build up your own little community and have people that are doing the same job as you, that's a really valuable asset, because you can share leads, you can support each other and things like that. So yeah, the next course is going to be Twitter focused, but yeah, to be announced.
Cool. And then you mentioned the mentorship, which sounds like it almost went too well.
Yeah. The mentorship, I actually, over the last couple of months, I had to stop taking on new mentees because it was just getting, the demand was more than the supply, really, as one person trying to help like 20 people on a one-on-one basis. So I've also got some ideas around that and how I can scale it a little bit better. Like what I touched on before, how can I help as many people as possible at scale is the problem that I'm trying to solve right now. But community could potentially be the answer for that.
How are you, like, time-wise, balancing between the paid clients and the potential paid products in the future kind of thing? Because for being able to take a month off, even within your schedule, is quite something to do. So how do you find that balance? How are you managing it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky because I've got like a lot of savings and I've done well over the years with freelance, so I can be pretty flexible with my schedule and who I work with. I can be choosy and that. So if I want to do a course, really what I'll try and do is I'll plan it like on a month by month basis. So something that I came up with right early in the year was to try and do like a project per month, whether that be a personal project or it be a client project. So I try and like take one thing as like my main focus for that month, and then I'll be doing other little things around it as well. But I'll try and have like one primary focus. But to break that down like more granularly, like on a day by day basis, I never take on like more than 2 like big tasks that I want to complete. So let's use today as an example. Like I know that I've got a couple of like interviews like this, podcasts. So I'll do those like in the afternoon, but then this morning I was working on some programming work for a client, and then that's me done. That's my 2, mini projects for that day. And I find that level of like separation works really well.
Cool. Now, I always do this thing where I ask for 3 facts about yourself to make 2 true and 1 a lie, and let me figure out the lie. What do you have for me, Tom?
Okay. So number 1, I used to weigh nearly double what I weigh now. Number 2, I once went unawares to a client meeting in a porn studio.
Right.
And number 3, I was the Yorkshire Pokemon trading card game champion in 1999.
Oh, come on! I hope that's true. In fact, I hope more than that is true. So 1999, you were what?
So, like the game that comes with, you buy the booster packs and then you play the game. We always used to get together at school and we used to play against each other, like with the energy cards and things like that.
No, so my kids have got these and I never understand what the hell is going on. It's like pimped up top trumps as far as I can gather. But you took it to like the county level.
Yeah. Did
you get a trophy?
I got in the paper and I got a medal.
Nice. Oh, okay, this sounds plausible. Tell me about the porn studio. So you were going to a prospective client meeting and they just gave you an address or something?
Yeah, all I knew is that it was a photographer and it was at this address in Barnsley where I used to live. And I turned up and it was a warehouse and it was quite clearly an adult entertainment studio.
Wow.
When we had the meeting and I built a website, but it wasn't for the porn side of the business. It was actually for, this is even the funnier part of it, it was for like a family portrait business that he ran on the side.
God.
And I was like,
Well, who are we to judge diversifying income? We've
exactly,
talked about it
exactly.
ourselves, right? So you used to weigh double. How long ago are we talking that you used to weigh double what you do now?
This was 11 years ago.
And is that a gradual loss?
Over time, a big bulk of it came quite early on in my mid-20s, and then it's just been a constant, like... I'm at a bit of a plateau now, but then chipped away at it really towards my like later 20s and early 30s.
And what's your main way of losing weight?
Gym and dog walking. So I walk, I've got a dog and he needs about 3 or 4 miles a day, so I'm walking every morning, then I'm in gym 3 times a week as well.
Oh, man. Okay, you see, your repetition there kind of adds weight to that, but that doesn't mean that you... I want the Pokemon one to be true. I love a triumph from I don't know how old you were at the time, but your childhood, effectively. Well, maybe you weren't. Maybe you beat a load of 12-year-olds.
That's why I was champion.
30. How old were you when you won that?
At 12.
Yeah, okay, right. So... But then the porn studio, that sounds plausible. But I'm not sure where the weight loss would come from if that wasn't true either, which makes me think. And now I'm going to say that the porn studio is the lie.
Wrong. The Pokemon one's the lie.
Oh, I'm so sad that you didn't win.
I never entered a tournament professionally. I just used to play with my friends.
Oh, man, I thought you were an early comer to esports before it was a thing. I thought you were there. You totally had me. Okay, now, if you could tell your younger self one thing about being freelance, what would that be?
Think like a business. Put time into learning about pricing, negotiation, sales, keep marketing always, and invest in connections.
Yeah. Do you ever wish you had gone and worked elsewhere, or are you glad you started straight out of uni, as it were?
No, I'm glad I did what I did, because I think it taught me how to fend for myself really early on. And I think that there's a point that you get to when you're freelance or solopreneur or whatever, that you've always got confidence in yourself that you'll be able to make money somewhere. And I think that that's what jumping straight into freelancing taught me at a very early age, and it's always stood me in good stead and give me the confidence that I've got now.
Tom, it's been so good to talk to you. Go to beingfreelance.com. There is links through to what all of our guests get up to, which means that you can check out Tom's website, because he's been talking about how effective it is for him. But also, of course, everything that he's doing with the course or the book and so on and so forth. So that's all at beingfreelance.com. Also, if you're a freelance parent like myself or Tom, don't forget, we also do the Doing It for the Kids podcast, me and Frankie from the Doing It for the Kids community. So since you've got your app out, presumably listening to a podcast, why not search and subscribe to that too? So search for Doing It for the Kids. But for now, Tom, thank you so much, and all the best being freelance.
Thanks a lot, Steve. It's been great.
Okay, that is it. I am donning my sun hat. It's a very nice hat, thanks for asking, and going off to drain the UK of ice cream as best I can for the next couple of months. But like I mentioned earlier, I'm not vanishing entirely. I'll be hanging out in the Being Freelance community, so come join me and over 3,000 freelancers from around the world. It'd be awesome to see you in there. If you're already a member but you've not popped in recently, please do. There's always great threads, and like Kat Velos said a couple of weeks ago, yeah, the best thing to do is just to get involved. Do it every day, and then you become a regular, and then suddenly you're not alone being freelance in a really genuine way. So please do come join us, beingfreelance.com. Before I go though, I want to say a big thank you to Sophie Livingston. Sophie has been running her own freelance business as Kickstart content over the past few years, and has been a huge support for me and what I've been doing with Being Freelance. She's been writing the show notes and uploading it and things like that, but way more than that, she's become a friend and a supporter, you know, like somebody who encourages me and kicks me up the arse to get things done. She helped me with my very first talk that I did for Being Freelance when I was nervous. Like, she went through and sense checked and typo checked for course when I created How to Get Started Being Freelance. Like, really, honestly, Sophie, if you're listening to this, I can't thank you enough. When you're creating something like this, it can be easy to kind of think, oh, does anybody care? But like, really, Sophie, honestly, you have been such a support, and I thank you for it. You have kept me going with this. Sophie, I wish you all the best. I know you're going to do awesome things. Yay, Sophie, everyone. But I continue, though, with this come September, so I shall see you for more Being Freelance podcasts very soon indeed. You have a great couple of months being freelance. Take care. See you soon.